course, we've talked about Indiana hosting the biggest non-conference game they've hosted in over 40 years. Since USC came in 81, I think it was. A number 8 Cincinnati team that is, I was talking to Dylan earlier, they are still looking to gain respect from national audience, from people. And so there's a lot riding for them on this game, but there's just as much riding for Indiana on this game because of the crowd impact of having a sold-out crowd and what happens with a win or a loss in front of that audience. You have this audience right now, and I'm not saying if they were to lose the game that everybody is just going to dump, but it will have an impact on the fans going forward on how this game turns out.
No, I mean, I've compared it to the IU Kentucky game in 2011, and not in terms of any sort of, sorry, that's my phone. Forgive me, I forgot to put it on silent. But any sort of rivalry significance, or in terms of, obviously basketball is always going to be a bigger deal than football. Kentucky was number 1 in the country. All those sorts of things. But what it more is that was a moment that gave a generation of IU basketball fans who could only, blandly remember the 2002 national title game run. It gave them their own moment. It gave them kind of their own sort of moment in time to validate all of their emotional investment into IU basketball and to basically tether their emotional attachment to IU basketball. And of course, that doesn't mean that IU is obviously going on to win national titles or anything like that, but it just, generations of fans need those moments to just sort of validate that emotional investment. And IU football fans just haven't had that moment in a really long time. And obviously they had wins last season, but no one could be there. And so it didn't feel the same way. And you didn't have quite literally the moment of, when I was in college, everybody ran on the field when IU beat Purdue to go to the Insight Bowl in 2007. And that wasn't a good team, or at least it wasn't a team as good as this one, I don't think. And obviously that Purdue team wasn't very good. I think they finished 6-6. But it was still a moment that IU fans got to enjoy after a long time without anything commensurate to that. This fan base, I think, is desperate for that moment. And I think this fan base, not necessarily, I'm not saying that Indiana is going to go from struggling to get fans and seats to, 10 straight years of sellouts or anything like that. But this fan base is really ready, I think, to buy in, kind of whole hog now, like jump in with both feet. And I think they've been behind Tom Allen's project for a few years now. And obviously last year they were very excited, but again, they couldn't be there. So those big wins probably felt, a little bit detached, like almost like they kind of happened in a vacuum. And you think about Indiana's biggest wins in 2019, probably Purdue on the road, Nebraska on the road. They none of them were at home. And I think that what this, especially after you see the crowd last weekend against Idaho, what it feels like is at stake, or is maybe we call it an opportunity for Indiana here now, is the possibility or the potential for being able to give fans that moment that they tether themselves to and that they keep coming back because of for the foreseeable future. And then all of a sudden you're maybe not fighting for big crowds when Minnesota's in town on the second to last weekend of the season, or you're not fighting for a big crowd. I think a couple of years from now, Indiana starts its series with Louisville. You maybe you get more students that say, I'm going to make an effort to be back in Bloomington by the Saturday after Thanksgiving for the Purdue game, because that game used to be the Saturday before Thanksgiving. It got moved around. Now they struggle to get students there because most students don't come back from Thanksgiving break until the Sunday. Maybe that changes. And students say, no, I'm going to go back on the Saturday because I need to be at the IU Purdue game. You just kind of need those moments for fans to hold on to. And I think this can be one of them. And obviously they have to win, likelihood for it to be one of them, but I think it genuinely can be. And I think that's kind of if you remove, if if we kind of put the X's and O's to one side for a second, that's what I think might be kind of on or at stake, I should say, this weekend.
Do you worry a little bit for IU that putting that much? Because I agree with you on all of that. Do you wonder if putting that much into a game like this, where obviously it's going to be very difficult to win, that if you don't win, that kind of it goes the other way, where fans kind of just go same old IU and the crowds aren't as big the rest of the season?
I mean, I think if you're, first of all, I'd point out the next two home games are Homecoming and Ohio State, so I don't know that they're going to necessarily worry about big crowds for the next couple. If Indiana, let's say Indiana loses but still goes 7-5, I think fan interest is still going to remain high. You're just maybe not going to have that moment, or unless, hey, maybe Indiana upsets Ohio State, and that's the moment. I think definitely, I think definitely it's possible that if the season kind of, keeps veering off course, that fans will, disengage from it the way that fans tend to do. But I'd say two things. Number one, Indiana doesn't really have a choice in that. It's not like Indiana is trying to big this up. Tom Allen, his players, they're not the ones out there saying this is the biggest game in 50 years. This is, they're not asking for this to be that moment. In the same way, frankly, Tom Crean did not ask for that Kentucky game to be that moment. It was a big game on the schedule, and what it became going into it became very organically. And Indiana really couldn't control that, and Indiana really can't control this. Now, you'd be dumb to try for a variety of reasons, but one way or the other, it's kind of out of Indiana's hands. So I don't think you can look at it and say, oh, be careful, because they just don't get a choice. Number two, the other thing too is, quite frankly, there's nothing in Tom Allen's background or MO that says he's going to care that much in terms of the way he talks about this game with his players. Now, he's going to care whether fans show up. He's very invested in getting his fan base to buy in. We hear him, encouraging fans all the time, praising fans all the time. But when he's talking about this game to his players, I cannot imagine he's sitting there saying, hey, guys, we need to win this game so we can get some more sellouts. I don't think he would ever allow himself or his staff to take that kind of big picture approach. So I just think, frankly, I don't know how much there is Indiana can do to control that. And again, Indiana could beat Ohio State later this season, and we wind up saying the same thing, if not more. I think that win, even if Ohio State, let's say, we're ranked lower, I think that win would mean even more because it's a conference opponent, so Ohio State, et cetera. But I guess the short answer, and not the rambling one, forgive me, is that you don't always get to choose, which games wind up being sort of generational moments for your program. You've just got to be ready to greet that moment when it does arrive.